Dom, are you ready? You want to
Sure.
get started? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks everybody for joining. I know a bunch of you on there on the Zoom call, but those I don't know, I'm Tom Dwyer. I played for Dom as a number of the coaches and dads on the call here. I was also lucky enough to serve as captain for Dom in 1990 at Brown. And just, I know to me, it seems a little ridiculous to introduce Dom because I feel like everybody knows, but we got some younger folks. So I think I'll just give a little bit of background. Before Dom was a great coach, he was a great player. He was All-American at Brown. He represented Team USA in the 1978 World Games. And then he got into coaching. He was a 3-time National Coach of the Year. He was a 4-time coach of national champions at Virginia, including the 2006 team that was undefeated and considered one of the best teams in the history of lacrosse. Dom was inducted in the Lacrosse Hall of Fame, which I think he was inducted as a great coach, but I think he also qualified as a great player as well. Last year, Dom wrote a book, which you see here. We have a bunch of copies in my house.
There you go.
It focuses on his journey in lacrosse, but mostly focuses on leadership, which I consider, one of the skills that is probably not as developed for most teams. We work on stick work and conditioning and strategies on the lacrosse field, but the teamwork and leadership part is not always focused upon. So I think that's what Dom's going to focus on talking about to us. He is very knowledgeable, and when he's going to talk, I think for about a half an hour, and then we're going to take questions and try to make this interactive. It's a nice group. I'll just point out before Dom goes that I see Drew Fox, who also played for Dom. Harvey Smith and I were teammates at Brown and played for Dom. And I don't know John Haldy, but he was also a captain for Dom from what I understand. So thanks to you guys for joining, and thanks everybody else for joining. This is going to be a great session. And Dom, thank you for joining and bringing your insight to our group. Appreciate it very much.
Well, Tommy, thanks very much. I'm really happy to be here. This is great. And it is really a treat to see so many old friends, and this is a topic that I really enjoy. I've thought about it a lot and enjoy talking about. And I would tell all the young people on the call that, we solicited some questions beforehand, and I would tell you, I'm not just blowing smoke at you, really, really impressive group of questions, and we could probably take any couple of the questions and spend a good hour talking about, just 2 or 3 of the questions that you guys presented here. And so I'm going to talk here for a bit, and try not to take too long so we can at least get to some of the questions. We're probably not even going to get to all of the questions that were submitted, but we'll try to do whatever we can. And you can always reach out to Tommy or one of the older guys here and get my contact information. I would be happy to hear from you, and I would be happy to respond. And if you don't get something covered today, so anyway, strange time in our world. Certainly, I hope everybody is doing okay and safe at home with their families. And we're here in Charlottesville, Virginia. I'll start out by just telling you a little bit about my background. Series of things along the way in my journey that are relevant to what we're going to talk about today. I grew up in New York on Long Island. I was the first generation of my family to go off to college. Neither of my parents had gone to college. None of my older brothers and sisters. I have an older sister had gone off to college. So I went to Brown University. I got recruited to play football, even though I'm from Long Island. I had never seen lacrosse before I got to Brown, and so I got to Brown, and I happened to be the captain of the freshman football team that year. That was the fall of 1970, and then a buddy on the football team talked me into going out for lacrosse, and I found myself, struggling a little bit socially, the way a first year student, the way a lot of freshmen are. I struggled a little bit socially, struggling a little bit academically. Felt most comfortable over on the athletic side of things. And so when this person said to me, "Why don't you come out for lacrosse?" I thought to myself, I'll give it a try. And I was curious, having grown up on Long Island, I'd certainly heard of the game, even though I'd never seen it. And so when I picked up a lacrosse stick in the beginning of my freshman year in college, it was the first time. So when I'm talking to young people in particular, I get to young camps and all, and I'm telling people that if they feel badly because they're behind some of their peers in their stick work or their skill work and all, I'm an example. I never even touched the stick until I was 18 years of age. The first lesson in this whole thing, if we're taking notes here, may be that, anything is possible. If I'm here talking to you guys today, it's an indication that anything is possible, and if you put your mind to it, you can get it done. You just never know. And, and so, and the truth of the matter is that when I first started playing lacrosse, I just immediately fell in love with the game. Absolutely. Almost as if, and I almost feel like I'm making this up or embellishing this a little bit, almost as if the first time I touched the stick, I felt like this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And so for me, getting to work in the game, the typical thing of a ball and a wall every day for me. I'm in an Ivy League college. I played 2 more years of varsity football, so I'm playing 2 sports at a school that I had to work hard at academically to keep up. And there was still time for me to get out on the wall every single day, because it was so important to me, that I wanted to be known for being more than just an athlete. I wanted to also become a skilled player, So I started playing lacrosse. I continued to play football, like I said, for 2 years. My second year my sophomore year at Brown playing lacrosse, I was on the third midfield to start the season, and which was pretty good for somebody that hadn't played the game a lot. I'm now on the varsity, but the coach, the guy I played for at Brown, was somebody that if you weren't on the first 2 midfields, you didn't get to shoot in the drills. It was like the starting attackman and the first couple of middies got to shoot. Nobody else got to shoot. The rest of us were chasing balls around in the shooting drills and all like that. And we got to this, it was the spring break, my sophomore year, we're in Baltimore. And I remember going up to the head coach and saying to him, you don't tell us anything. I don't even know the plays, you weren't spending any time with me. And he gave me a little coach double talk to get out of his face. And I can tell you, it was one of the dramatic moments in my career, is that when I walked away from that conversation with him, I just decided I'm playing, and so I got to, I just stopped being afraid. That moment right there, I just stopped being afraid. I stopped being afraid of whether I was going to get slashed in practice. I stopped being afraid of caring what the upperclassmen thought of some young guy that was going to work hard all the time, and I just decided I'm going to do this. And so, again, the lesson there is to take responsibility, and so for my playing career, it was my sophomore year, that moment in my spring break, when I just decided I'm gonna take responsibility for my career. And in most cases, for all you young people there, I want to play more. I want to be better. My advice to you is do something about it. What are you willing to do? And so I played, and I went on to have a playing career in college. Played 2 more years of varsity football, 4 years of lacrosse. Graduated from Brown. The head lacrosse coach was also the head soccer coach, and he asked me to come back and be his assistant. Nowadays, you wouldn't hire someone in their main sport to be your first assistant, and I became the first assistant in soccer and lacrosse, and literally had never kicked a soccer ball. And so here's someone who had gone off to college to be a football player, essentially, and graduated as a soccer and lacrosse coach. Coached at Brown for 18 years, 8 years as the assistant coach, first assistant on the varsity, and 10 years as the head coach at Brown. Got the job at the University of Virginia in 1992. Went to at that point, UVA hadn't won a national championship in maybe 20 years or 22 years, maybe. And clearly that was the expectation for me going in there, was that we were going to win the national championship. And so my first spring at Brown, I'd never won a national championship, so it was going to be new for me also. but we got to work, and we got back to the playoffs my first year in '93. My second year in '94, we actually kind of came out of nowhere late in the year, made a run in the playoffs, got through the overtime of the NCAA finals. It's only my second year at UVA. I remember distinctly walking off the field, thinking to myself, this is easy. We're going to win 100 of these things. We're in the finals here. It's only my second year. We got back to the finals. We got back to the semifinals the next year. We didn't win. My fourth year in '96. Again, we play our way to the finals, and we're now getting ready to go back. We're now playing our way into the overtime of the final game again. And so I can I remember this moment in my life. We're in the huddle to start the overtime. During that season, we had used 2 face-off guys, and during that game, we had used 2 face-off. I didn't know who was going to take the face-off to start the overtime period. It is the NCAA championship. We're in the huddle. I look across the huddle. One of the face-off guys was a big football kid by the name of David Wren, and we make eye contact across the huddle, and he mouths the words to me, "I got this one." And so I'm feeling like, you couldn't ask for a better reaction from an athlete in that situation at that moment in time. It's now been 25 years. Virginia hasn't won a championship. And this young man is saying to me, I'm going to get this one, coach. And so you feel like, okay, we're finally going to get this done. We go out and line up for the face-off. And David couldn't have lost that face-off any quicker had he just taken the ball and rolled it to the Princeton guys. And first Princeton guy that touched it, back of the net, game over. We don't win again. And so the next piece of the puzzle for me is, again, learning that winning is hard. So for all you guys and gals that are trying to get this done, winning is hard. It doesn't happen easy. And there's no deserve in sports. You don't win because you're a good person. You don't win because it's your turn to win. You win because you make the plays that need to be made in order to win games. So we're now left with I've been in Virginia now for 4 or 5 years. We haven't won a national championship yet. You wonder what coaches spend their time doing during the day, and frankly, what we do all day is trying to figure out what I describe as trying to build a better mousetrap, trying to figure out how to do this better, a better play, a better practice plan. Who do I need to recruit that's going to get us over this hump? How are we going to get this done? And there's a certain pressure that comes along with that, with trying to succeed and break through, and it happens at all different levels. So we wound up. It got to be it was the summer of '98, and for some of you, you may appreciate how hot it can be in Central Virginia in the middle of the summer. It was the middle of July. I was sitting in my office looking out the window to the practice field, and there was a young man. So you're left with what do we have to do to get this done? Who do we have to recruit? And I look out on the practice field, and there's a young man running up and down the practice field, holding a 45-pound plate above his head. And it was one of our returning seniors, and a guy by the name of Tucker Radebaugh. And for Tucker, he just decided that it was going to be different in that 98, 99 year. There was a different kind of urgency to our conversations in the fall. And, he was going to, he was of a mind that we are going to get this done finally, and so now he had won our leadership award in the 2 previous years. So on a team like ours, as talented as the Virginia team is from year to year, for a sophomore to be chosen as the outstanding leader would tell you that he had the tools to put himself in a position to have an impact on this team. And so we got to that fall of '98, and there was, like I say, there was just a different tone to to how we went about our business, and a different kind of urgency. And the end of the story is that we go on and win the national championship in '99 for the first time. Probably the hardest working team to this day, probably the hardest working team I ever had. It's not just about hard work, but that's what that team needed to get over the hump. And it's a little bit relative to some of the questions that you've asked me, about the confidence and stuff of getting this done. For us, the confidence of being able to win in '99, came along with the fact that we knew that we had worked really, really hard in preparation, and we still needed to make the plays and do the things that we needed to do, but we had put the time into going into it. So in this case, when people ask me, what's the single key to your best teams, having the most successful teams? What's the key to success in a team sport like that? I always tell people it's the internal leadership. That in a program like Virginia, for years and years, we would always heard about how talented we were. You couldn't read an article that didn't have the word talent in the first sentence or the first paragraph and stuff. But for us and for me, as I look back at the best teams that I've had, going back into my Brown days or whatever else, the best ones, and it doesn't always have to be that you win a championship at the end of the day. But the point is that you're going to play as close to your potential as possible. And so for me, it's always been about that internal. I've never had a good team that didn't have that. It can take some different, it takes some different styles, but that's the key to what they have to what each of these teams that needs to have. So you're looking at somebody like Tucker, and you're saying, okay, well, what are the individual qualities of leadership that we look for? What were the individual qualities that he had that put him in a position where he could have that kind of influence on his peers? I was actually out in Missouri a couple of years back when I first began to think about these things, and a young man asked me about that. He asked me, what's the individual characteristics for leadership and for individual leadership, and kind of put you on the spot a little bit. And I think there were a number of words that might apply, but the one I chose that day is the one that I still think applies first and foremost. And the word I chose that day was fearlessness. And so I do believe that if you want to be a great leader, it requires a certain fearlessness. You all know how challenging it can be to stand up in front of your peers and tell them something they don't want to hear. In Tucker's case, or in the case of John Holdy, who's on this call, to stand up in that locker room and say to your peers, this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to do it every time. And we're not going to deviate from this mission. That can be a challenge. In turn, that person has to be able to maybe walk into the coach's office and say, "Hey, coach, we got to do this, or we got to do that. We got to change this or change that." It takes a certain fearlessness to have those qualities. And you have to be able to take it right to the edge. I talk about taking it to the edge of reasonableness. How far do I go? We all know, we've been around athletes, and actually one of the questions I got from somebody was talking about, I know athletes that are always screaming on the field. They're always screaming at this and that. And is that good leadership? And my answer is no, it's not. That it's much more challenging to talk to your peers in a meaningful way than it is just to yell at them. So you need to be able to go to the edge of reasonableness without stepping over the edge. Again, I'll refer to John Holdy. Our 2011 team that John was the captain of was my last national championship team. And that team was the epitome of great internal leadership. And there was a co-captain along with John, this guy, Bray Malphorus, who would almost be speaking in tongues when he was yapping at guys in the locker room, and he would finish, and John would say, "Okay, let me interpret that for you. Here's what you need to be able to do." And in Bray's case, he would go right to the edge, but without stepping over the edge. You can't lose your teammates. If you just yell at people, if you berate people, they're going to stop listening to you. And so you need to know what the limits are. But that certain fearlessness, being willing to do the things that need to be done. The second one I describe as selflessness. It's not being unselfish. great athletes are always kind of selfish. Great athletes want to shoot the ball. They want to shoot the hockey puck. They want to shoot the, whatever it is. And we want those guys to do that, and so, but the selflessness piece of it, selflessness to me more refers to you waking up in the morning and feeling like your first thought is, what can I do to help this team today? Selflessness is, man, I am really happy that Tommy Dwyer had a good day yesterday on the practice field. You may be the best player, but you find yourself thinking more about your teammates and your peers and the team itself. And again, if you want to be one of those great leaders, you need to have that sense of selflessness. It may also be that we need you to play a different position. Again, I'll refer to John Waldy. John wanted to be an attackman at UVA, but unfortunately there were some other guys that were a little better suited, and so we needed John to be a midi, and he was more than happy to do it. Played a key role on that national championship team in 2011. And there were other guys, Billy Gladding, we won a national championship in 2003, wanted to play on the offensive midfield, needed him on the defensive midfield, was willing to do that. If Doug Knight was on this call, when he was here, Timmy Whiteley was a left-handed player that I needed to play on the right-hand side on the attack. And, and so the other two attackmen on that line, Michael Watson and Doug Knight, are both in the National Hall of Fame. And I would tell you that Timmy might be there also, except he sacrificed for the team and played on the other side of the field made us better, and so all of that goes into that selflessness piece of it. One of the most important qualities is honesty. Again, you don't need to be looking for trouble. You don't need to be seeking out your teammates to give them the worst possible news. But when a teammate comes to you and says, hey, coach is screwing me, you don't just go along because it's easy to do that. You tell people the truth as much as possible. At the very least, you're telling your peers to go. You're telling your peers to go back and talk to coach again. I'm telling you right now, you telling your peers the truth about who they are and where they are in the team, on the team, while it might be difficult now. Excuse me, might be difficult now. At the end of the year or in 5 years, that person is going to turn to you at some point and say, I really appreciate that you told me the truth back then. It's not an easy thing to do, but it matters a great deal. In some ways, I might take that quality, that key, that may be the key quality, of all others in terms of the composition of putting a team together, is that you're honest with each other as much as possible. You need to be a hard worker. You don't need to be the best player. You don't need to be first in the running. It doesn't hurt that you are, again, 2003, we had a national championship team. The boy who won the Tualatin Award that year, Chris Rotelli, true story, from September until the national championship game in May, he won every run at every distance, and so the best player in the country was also the hardest worker on our team. That doesn't hurt, but it doesn't have to be that way. But if you want to be a leader, you need to be, your effort has to be unchallenged. And so that when you're turning to a peer and saying, we got to work harder, they know that you're working as hard as you can, and so you don't have to be first in the running, but your effort has to be first, and so that's really important. Self-discipline, you need to be, you need to be, you can't be a clown 22 hours a day and expect to be a leader for 2 hours a day. You want to have some moral authority. Again, talking to your teammates. For the older guys, for the college age kids, you talk about, I think you should be with your teammates in the evenings. But at the same time, there's an imperative that you're not somebody who's on the edge of disaster on a regular basis. And so, for everybody, getting your schoolwork done, just having it be done, behaving yourself, and so that you bring a certain self-discipline to the process, because again, we're going to need you to be able to talk to your peers. And you, again, if you're somebody on the edge, you're not going to have the moral authority that you would be, that you would be otherwise. A certain toughness is required. And it's interesting. I'm not talking about knocking somebody's head off. I've never been a big fan of that. Frankly, I was a football kid playing lacrosse, but I was never a big contact guy. I think I was a pretty tough player, a pretty physical player, but I was not interested in taking your head off or yelling at you or yapping at you or whatever else. Toughness to me, the enduring characteristic of toughness is consistency, and so you got to bring it every day. You want to be thought of as tough, then you need to be consistent. There's another element of toughness that has just been brought to my attention fairly recently. Actually, I read a book by I hate to give a Duke graduate any credit, but Jay Billis played basketball at Duke and wrote a book called Toughness. And it's hard to imagine Jay Billis writing a book on toughness, but there was a piece in the book where he talked about communication, being willing to communicate as being a characteristic of toughness. And that really resonated with me, especially in my own career. Again, relative to some of the questions you've asked me, I was a good player. I was a very good player. I was not, in retrospect, I was not a great leader because I reveled in sort of that strong, silent type. Now there's a place for guys like me on your team, but just in terms of leadership, you don't have to be, you don't have to be mouthy. You don't have to be yapping all the time, but there are just moments when something needs to be said. Now, if you're on the field and you're a defenseman, and you want to be a leader, you're going to be a leader all the time. You can't play defense unless you're willing to talk, and so, all of the athletes on this call have heard coaches, scream at them about being willing to communicate, especially at the defensive end of the field. And so that's true. You want to assume that role in leadership, you need to be willing to do that. You also need to be willing to speak up in general. Again, I do believe you walk the walk first and foremost. You can be the strong, silent type, but there are just moments when you need to step up and say the right thing. It's just required. Oftentimes, after practice or in the locker room or whatever else, and so you need to be willing to do that at the opportune moment. And so for me, that's the toughness element of it, is being willing to do those things right there. And then the last one for me, really, and there's a whole lot of other ones that you could think of these characters, but the main characteristics for me of individual leadership are these qualities that we've just talked about. And the last one to me is having a resilient spirit, which means to me, having a smile on your face, being willing to, I just think, I've said it to my athletes forever. You learn better with a smile on your face. You come out on the practice field, you don't have a great day, you take it home and stew on it all night and bring a pout out the next day. You're closed off. You're not listening to me. You're not listening to your teammates and stuff. And so you understand that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to get knocked on your fanny. You just bounce up with a smile on your face and you make the next play. And people are going to listen to you if you have a little smile on your face. You talk to people in a pleasant way. People are going to be more willing to listen to you. And so it's funny that as I've done a little investigation on this topic, when you talk about sense of humor and leadership, it's mostly military guys that talk about it, which was to me a little bit of a surprise. So even at that level, where it's life and death, those guys are talking about, having a sense of humor and having a resilient spirit and being willing to operate with a smile on your face. So those are the individual qualities that we look for. In terms of putting your team together, what I've also discovered is there is a Navy SEAL program that people have maybe some people on the call have probably taken advantage of it. It's called the program, and the Navy SEALs come in and they spend a day or day and a half and talk to your team and all. And the guy that runs that program is a guy by the name of Eric Kapitulik, and I've known Eric for a long time, and we have talked. I remember asking him one time. I said, "How many captains should you have on a team?" And Eric's answer to that was one. You can only have one leader, and I disagree with him a little bit when it comes to college sports or high school sports or club sports, because in the military we're in a foxhole. The signals have to be very clear. Everybody has to be on the same page. Keep your head down, or you might get it blown off. But in college, there's so many other distractions. There's, are you late? Did somebody not go to study hall? Are you late to practice? You got the wrong socks on. It's too much to drop on one guy's plate. And so, whether or not you have two captains or three captains, I don't know that there's a absolute correct answer to that, but you can have multiple people in that role, I think, on a team, going forward. But where I would agree with Eric is that at the very least, you need to have one. Somebody has got to be the lead dog on that team. You may have two or three captains. When I'm talking to groups of captain or seniors or captains or things like that, and if a team has two captains or three or four captains, I always tell them to be mindful of, not letting the responsibilities slide, the ultimate responsibilities slide. Somebody's got to be the alpha, to a certain extent. And frankly, I think you can win at the very highest level with one person absolutely fully committed to the mission. You can have more than one, but I think it's harder to have more than one with the same level of commitment. But you need somebody. Somebody has to be willing to stand up and be the person that takes that responsibility. And so that's, like I say, every good team I've had, and we talk about all the championship teams, we can go through some of them, and we'll have had that guy from Tucker Radabaugh on that first championship team to John Holdy and Bray Malphus in 2011. Now I had a championship team in 06 that was undefeated national champions. We had only one close game that year. I think we had three or four captains. That team was so talented that the mission was get those guys to the game on time, essentially. And but they were all. I had a bunch of older guys that were on the mission for that team was nothing gets in the way of the lacrosse. And so I had two guys that were academic All-Americans on that team. There was a social group, they did community service, this and that. But for them, nothing got in the way of the lacrosse. And so, leadership can take some different forms. But in my book, if you want to have a successful team, you want to have a team that plays close to its potential, somebody in that locker room has to be willing to step up and take that bull by the horns. Other things that are really important. Everybody's contribution matters. It's going to sound a little like coach speak, perhaps. Toward the end of my career, I was saying to guys, everybody's contribution in this locker room is equally important. And that may be a little bit of an exaggeration, but not a lot. Everybody's contribution is different. Yes, of course, everybody's contribution is different. Somebody's got to score some goals. Somebody's got to keep them out. Somebody's got to win face-offs and all. But the same way that one person can lift a team, one person can drag it down. In 2003, we're playing in the. We're about to play in the national semifinals. It was Thursday night. There was a banquet at the Final Four, and in those days, they've since discontinued this because it got a little out of hand. But in those days, there would be one player from each team that would get up and speak at the banquet. And we went last that night, probably alphabetically. Virginia, the other three teams, I don't want to embarrass them. Maryland, Hopkins, and Syracuse, but so their players got up and spoke first, and frankly, it was embarrassing. They got up and they're talking about, I hope you guys are ready because we're going to kick your butt tomorrow and this and that, and it was hard to listen to, frankly. And then we had a boy got up and spoke, and I hadn't checked his notes beforehand. I didn't even pick him to do it. The team picked him to give the talk. He didn't have to clear anything with me before he got up and spoke, but he got up and gave the most. It was Memorial Day weekend. He gave the most appropriate Memorial Day weekend speech you ever heard. And I would tell you that we floated out of that room. And we went on to win the national championship that year. We were the 3 seed. We beat the 2 seed in the semis and the 1 seed in the finals. And I've told this story in front of guys on that team. Chris Rotelli won the Tuaraton Award. I've told this story in front of him, and they all agree with me when I say that the boy whose name you probably haven't heard, his name is Hatcher Sneed. I would tell you that Hatcher Sneed had as much to do with us winning the national championship that year as anybody else. He didn't play 1 minute of those 2 games on that final weekend. But he had as much to do. He gave us a shot of confidence and lifted us, going into that weekend, and we rode that through and were able to win the national championship. Now, Chris Rotelli was the Tuaraton Award winner that year. The National Player of the Year. I would tell you also that Hatcher Sneed, if Chris Rotelli was first in the running from September to May, Hatcher Sneed was second the entire year. He was right behind Chris Rotelli he was in Chris Rotelli's ear the whole time. And so, Hatcher's role that year was pivotal to us being successful. And so the whole point of being part of a team is trying to get all the pieces pointed in the same direction. And our best chance to be successful is when everybody's willing to maximize their contribution. And everybody's going to have a different contribution. You have the obvious one, I'm the backup goalie. The goalie gets hurt. Am I ready? Have I put in the time and the proper preparation so I'm ready when that opportunity presents itself? But then there are these other things, these other ways that you can help. If I don't play on Saturday, but I run hard every single day, I work my tail off in the weight room, how can the people that are getting the attention on Saturday not be working as hard as they can when this other guy is doing this? And so I've told players that don't play all the time at times that, I respect your contribution more than you do, because I understand how hard it can be, not to be playing on game day and to have the same expectations in terms of effort and all. But it's really, really important to try to get everybody on the same page. That's going to be your best opportunity to be successful. What I would tell you overall is you can aspire whatever you're thinking about personal goals. I'd like to be I want to be a first team All-American. I want to be first team All-Conference. I want our team to win a national championship. I want to be a starter. I want to be a key player. Whatever it is, whatever your personal goals are. What I would suggest to you in the big picture of things is if you can set it out there that what your goal actually is to aspire to lead, that when you do the things that we've just been talking about, if you have that fearlessness of spirit, and you have that selflessness, you're going to be a hard worker, and you're going to give an honest effort all the time, and you're going to do it with a resilient spirit. You are going to wind up at a place that you probably couldn't imagine, individually in terms of your personal goals. You can't help but become a great player or become the maximum, maximize your potential, if you have these other things in mind, worrying about these other things. And so it's not quite so obvious, to anybody how worrying about my teammates are going to make me a better player. But I'm telling you that's how it works. There was an article that was published recently that I wrote. And again, I talk about Chris Rotelli in 2003. Chris Rotelli was the first team All-American as a junior. He was one of the leading goal scorers in the conference as a sophomore. His stats were like 30 and 5, both as a sophomore and a junior, one of the best offensive midfielders in the country. And I kept saying to him, you have so much more to offer us. And he would be looking at me like I had 2 heads. He'd say, Coach, what are you talking about? I'm one of the best players in the country, isn't that enough? And I kept saying to him, you got more, you got more, you got more. And for some reason, going into his senior year, it was almost like he was just like, I don't even know exactly what you're talking about, but I'm going to buy in. And that's when he started to, I'm going to win all the runs. I'm going to worry about my teammates. I'm going to be doing all these things. You know, he wound up scoring less goals his senior year than he did in either his sophomore or junior year. At the same time, he had more assists than the rest of his career combined. You know, and he wound up winning the Tuarton Award. He was the first male lacrosse player ever picked as the ACC Athlete of the Year. I mean, you know, personal, individual honors beyond what he probably imagined for himself. And it was simply because he kind of gave it up for the team, you know, and so, you know, I think that those things are correlated. And so, you know, for me, I love the game. I still love the game. You know, I still hack around a little bit up at Lake Placid in the summers, and you know, imagine myself in younger days. That's hard to believe. I'm as old as I am. You know, this is a game for some of the people that are newer to the sport. This is just a wonderful game. You know, if you respect this game, it can be your friend for a long time. And I don't take these kind of things. I don't take the fact that Harvey Smith and John Holdy and Tommy Dwyer and Drew Fox and Mark Petrone and Travis Love are on this call, and that we've remained friendly over the years. I don't take that for granted. It doesn't happen in every instance and all. And again, if you treat this game with respect, it can be your friend. And I do believe that's true. You know. And then finally, what I would suggest is, you know, I'm here today just trying to let you, you know, to be able to recount a little bit of my experience, because I want you to know that it's worth it. There are not a lot of things you're going to do in your life where you're going to be with a group of your peers trying to get something, making a collective effort to try to get something done. It's a really, really, really special opportunity, you know. And for some of you young players, maybe you're a sophomore, or you know, you're thinking that the club team, I'm going to be on this club forever. I'm only a sophomore, you know. Go ask one of the seniors how they feel about that, how quickly the time goes. Go ask Drew Fox how fast his career was over, you know. So this moment, this may be your best shot, you know. And so don't let this get away from you. And so again, whatever effort is required, if I've described something, boy, that sounds really difficult, I'm telling you, it's worth doing at the end of the day. And there are not a lot of things in your life that are going to potentially bring you greater satisfaction than being part of something with your peers, where you actually do get to a point where you're playing close to your potential, you know. So I've already probably spoken for too long, Tommy, and so why don't I leave it there for now, and we can kind of go wherever we want this to go.
Sure. Dom, thank you so much. And we did have a bunch of questions, which I think will be great. We can get a little more interactive.
Tommy, can I chime in here for a second?
Yeah. Nody, go ahead.
Coach Starsia, could you let the group know while we have you here, like, who was your last coaching victory against, and was it this summer?
My last coaching victory? Oh, this summer, you mean the PLL? I coached in the PLL. We didn't win a lot of games.
No, I mean the high school. I mean the national high school.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. In the fall. That's right. That's right. We beat. We played in. Ryan Curtis, one of my former players, called me up and asked me to do he said, "Coach, I got a strange favor to ask." There was a high school tournament where teams were playing by their high school team, and in Baltimore, and he couldn't. He found out he wasn't allowed to coach his team, and so he asked if I could coach his team in this high school tournament in Baltimore. And I think the very last game that I have coached in my career, and maybe I'll stop coaching because it was such a notable result. We beat Gilman by a goal in this tournament, and you know, we had like 15 guys dressed, and Gilman had like 40 guys, all perfectly coiffed out in the right stuff and all, and we won anyway. You know, so
it was a tough loss for me, Coach.
Sorry about that, John.
But I wanted to thank you and you know, for coming on, and you know, you echo some of the same things that Tommy does, and Harv and Trav and Mark and, you know, Johnny when he played for us. there's such a common thread. And a lot of the stuff that I do, I've taken from guys like yourself. And so I guess this isn't a question, but maybe you could comment on this. What I've learned to tell my players at Haverford and at Gilman, Mesa, regardless of the level that you play, and I've been fortunate to I have 3 kids of my own that have played, but what I like to tell them is you don't get to choose how hard you work or what type of teammate you are based on playing time or role, right? So to be a part of the team at Virginia, there were certain expectations that you had for all of your guys. And I think as coaches, we share that. And I know you talked a lot about that throughout, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it goes to the essence of what we did for a living for all those years. What I did for a living all those years, what you do is, and part of it is, is convincing young people. Again, like I was sort of suggesting, convincing young people to respect their role in the program. For a guy, I think of, more recently on the college level, John Haldy's team and 2011, all the different roles that guys had to play on that team. And then they needed to step up at different times because that team was in such flux for so much of the year and all. And so again, you just want to focus on the team, all the things that I was just talking about is, this is the opportunity, this moment in time, you want to seize this moment and make the most of this. I tell young people all the time, when college guys, 25 years from now, you are not, when you come back for your college reunion, you are not going to be talking about some fraternity party or some other little grab ass thing you were doing in practice. What you're going to be talking about is that day that you beat, we beat Lower Merion or Penn, we beat Cornell, we beat Duke, whatever it was going to be. When as a unit you came together and you made this thing happen, that's the kind of impression that it makes in your life. Again, when we're done here, go find John Haldy's talk today about on that 2011 experience. It's on social media somewhere today. Ironically, I just picked it up earlier today, and it still made the hair on my neck stand up. Just John talking about what that was like for him, going through that and all. And so again, your responsibility is to take advantage of this opportunity. And for me, I would always be saying to my teams, we're going to a game. I don't care who we're playing. I'm not asking you for 110%. That's baloney. I would just be saying to the guys all the time. I said, look, here's what I want tomorrow. I want your best shot. That's all, and so I don't care what your role is. I want your best shot tomorrow. So take a little time tonight, get yourself ready to go, and then let's give it our best shot tomorrow. Then more power to them. Hats off to that. But that's all I want. That's all I'm asking.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Coach.
Dom, another question. Thank you, Nody. Dom, the other question we had, and I think you touched upon it a little bit, that you mentioned even when you were younger as a player, that you struggled a little bit to find the confidence and your voice and your legs to lead. Could you talk about how you broke through that as a player and a coach, and then how you advise others how to deal with that? Because as a coach now, you sometimes see players who, they're having the good thoughts, but how do you take that next step to take from the thought to the action?
I would tell you that, if you're a 10th grader and you're playing on some club and you feel like I don't have great confidence, if that's what Tommy's referring to, somebody like that, I would tell you that the largest individual issue with athletes at the college level, at the University of Virginia, is actually a lack of confidence. And so this whole confidence question, people come across maybe at our level or at the level here, as having this overwhelming confidence. In most cases, it's not true, and so it's mostly about a lack of personal, genuine, real personal confidence. And so if you're a young player and you feel like I am lost here a little bit, I don't have that, just know that first off is that you're not alone. Two is that it's the responsibility of the coaches that we have, is that you hope that you have good people in leadership positions that nurture young people, nurture college young people, into developing real confidence. To me, genuine confidence comes from two things. One is having done something. I have the confidence of knowing that I have succeeded in that situation. I have made that play. I am capable of doing that. Now, there are a lot of players that don't have that piece of it yet. But then the other part of it is, I think genuine confidence also comes from knowing that you're prepared. Again, I'll use an example of me in high school. When football began to become important to me as a sophomore going into my junior year, a little bit lost, certainly did not have great confidence, but somehow got talked into or convinced of how important, weight training and those kind of things were going to be. And then I went crazy, and I just got to work and got stronger and all. And so that when my senior football season came around, I knew I was prepared. I had put the time in. I knew I was ready. If you're going into a game or a situation or a season and you're thinking to yourself, I hope I'm ready, then it's going to be, if you don't make that play right off the bat, it's going to be hard to feel that confidence. You want to build that confidence, then make sure, maybe you need a coach or someone with greater experience to be able to give you some advice at this level, but find out what's going to be required in order for you to be successful and be willing to put that time in, maybe beforehand. For all of you young people, I know that this is a challenging time, but now is the time when, I'm not as big as some of my teammates. I'm not as fast as some of my teammates, but boy, you could be the most creative during this time of. You might have another month or 6 or 8 weeks here, where whatever you do individually is going to impact what happens if we ever get back out on the field again, or when we get back on the field again. And so, I want to be a good player. That's all fine and dandy. The more important question is, what are you willing to do about it? And so I want to develop the confidence that to be successful, to be a good player. Okay, put the time in now. Again, if you haven't succeeded at this level yet, you haven't made the play yet, hopefully that's going to happen for you and you'll develop that kind of confidence. But right now, put the time and the work in so that you're prepared to be able to seize that opportunity when it presents itself.
Thanks, Dom. I know you've heard Dom refer to John Haldy a bunch of times, who's on this call. If you're joining, ladies, captain of Dom's 2011 team. Me and Trone and John Nostra and Dougie Knight were lucky enough to coach John at Haverford as well. So I'm just wondering, John, I know like Dom's referred to how many tough decisions you guys had to make in that 2011 campaign. I was wondering if you could comment on what you learned from Dom when you played for him down there.
Yeah, no, it was pretty peculiar year, pretty special year. We had to deal with a lot of adversity, a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. But I think one of the things that Dom does such a great job of is he really gives a lot of responsibility to his players. And, I had a lot of friends that played at different colleges for different coaches, and their experience was night and day from the one that I had, because they had coaches that were super hands-on, had a ton of rules, didn't really give you a whole lot of leeway, but that just really wasn't coach's style. He gave us a lot of responsibility, and with that power obviously comes a lot of responsibility, and he really trusted us to make the right decisions all the time. And so what I would tell you guys is the accountability aspect is one of the biggest things you can probably take with you as you go through your career. You got to be someone that people can trust. And I think the guys on our team, when we were making those tough decisions, knew that we were doing it in the best interest of the team. And I know that Coach in his book, and which I highly recommend all of you guys to read, there's one chapter where Coach puts in a letter that he would write for advice to young people entering their first year of college. And one of the pieces of advice is to not call your parents every time something bad happens. You know, if you get a bad grade, if you're not getting all the playing time that you wanted, you run out of money, you get a cold, whatever, you know, don't go running to mom and dad to tell them about it. You know, obviously they want to keep in touch with you and check in, see how things are going, but you don't need to tell them about every time you stub your toe. And in kind of a funny sort of way, Dom approaches that the same way with his team and with his captains. It's, you don't have to go running to Dom every time something bad happens. He trusts us to make the right decisions on behalf of the team. So I would tell you guys, if things aren't necessarily going your way, I mean, take the accountability and make it happen for you. And I was guilty of it myself. My freshman year, as Coach said, like I came in as an attackman. I personally thought I should have been playing more than I was, and I would, you know, complain to my parents about it a lot. And looking back on it, being honest with myself, I mean, that just doesn't do you any good. I mean, complaining to your parents isn't going to get you more playing time. You got to take the accountability aspect of it and work on it. And so that's always something that I really respect the coach about, is that he really trusts his players and trusts his leaders to make the right decisions. And we didn't always have to go to him every time something bad happened. And obviously we knew he was there as a sounding board and we could get advice from him when need be, but that wasn't meant to be a crutch. And we didn't have to go to him every single time something happened. So it was a pretty special experience. I could go on for days about it, but I definitely learned a lot from Dom and took a lot from those lessons with me from when I was in college till now. So.
And I would just chime in and just say that it's a, you know, it's kind of a mutual admiration society, but it goes to a, you know, again, the most important team quality, I think, is an honesty and a trust, you know, amongst the members. And we had to make some difficult decisions in the middle of that season. But John and the captains that I had, they knew they could come in and talk to me, and they knew that I was going to respect their opinion, and that we were going to work together to try to get some things done. And you know, it worked out for us, you know, so the other piece that John talked about was the accountability piece. You know, again, you know, I may have referenced it earlier. I think about it in terms of what I was describing my sophomore year in college, you know, when I wasn't playing enough. And, you know, I would suggest to any of the young athletes on this call that picking the people that should play is not the most challenging piece of what your coaches do. You know, that it is not that difficult. And in most cases, you know, when you, especially when you have a chance to, you get a little further along, you have the opportunity, the advantage of hindsight. Most of you would make the same decisions that your coaches make in terms of who should be playing and all, you know. And so accountability and it also goes along with what I was suggesting earlier, which is to take responsibility. You know, I would also suggest that most of you probably could impact to a greater extent your playing situation, whatever it is. I want to play more. I want to play some. I want to be great. You know, again, you know, what are you willing to do about it? And if you want it badly enough, then dig in and get it done.
All right, thanks, Coach. So as you also heard Coach referred to earlier is Dougie Knight, who played for him. You know, he graduated in 1997. He was Player of the Year. He couldn't make this call tonight, and I know how bummed Dougie is because I know how tight him and Coach are. But he did send me a question for you, Coach.
Oh, there you go.
He said, "What do you miss most about coaching?"
What I miss most about coaching is the process of being a coach. You know, I just, you know, the games piece of it, I don't really miss hardly at all. It's almost as if I feel like, okay, I had enough stress over 42 years of coaching college lacrosse. The easy answer is you miss the people. But for me, I also loved the process of, I loved walking in the locker room at 3:00. I loved being in the weight room. I really loved the practice field. I coached in the professional league this past summer. It really wasn't my cup of tea necessarily, because it wasn't really the things that I enjoy about being a coach. So like I say, it's the process, the little things that I loved and that I miss. I'm actually, between the book and some of these things, I've actually had more contact with my former players in the last couple of years than I did. I had my present teams always, they were all over me, but I've remained in contact with all these guys over these last couple of years. It's just been a great joy, and so I feel like I've been in greater contact with the folks. But given the druthers, putting together a practice plan and going out to the practice field, and a lot of coaches will tell you that being on the practice field is the best part of the day. I'm not sure that they all quite feel that way. I did. I just loved being at practice, and that, again, to this thing of having a smile on your face and that being the right kind of atmosphere. I would like to think my players could tell from my body language that I was enjoying being there with them in that atmosphere. And like I say, I think it made for a more productive environment.
All right, thanks, Coach. I'll just read you what Dougie's comment real quick, and then I'll hand it back over to Tom. He says, "I've always marveled at and been thankful for how Dom is able to treat everyone he comes in contact with as the most important person. When he was coaching or now, there's nothing I or any of my teammates have ever asked him that he hasn't been willing to help us with, and he has had hundreds of players come through his program."
It's very nice of him to say that. So,
well, Tom, if you want to read some more,
Sure,
go ahead, bud.
sure. And Dom, I'll just echo that. I know I've thanked you so many times, but I think you're the most. Yeah, I bought a lot of books, but I think you're the most respected voice in lacrosse, and I'm so glad you wrote the book. It's wonderful. One of the other questions that came up with several of the players that emailed and texted me was, if they take your challenge and your theory, like your team will be better, you will be better individually if you decide to be a leader. And they want to do that. Are there some things that they can take, some little steps to go that way if they're not sure how to start? What are some of the things that you would like to see a young player do as a coach? If you're watching them or they're on your team, how do they start?
Well, first off, I'm a big fan of spontaneity. I'm a big fan of these things kind of happening naturally, that not forcing. Now, again, into 2011, John's year, the boy, Bray Malfris, who I've talked about, and, Bray's an Army Ranger. And so he, decorated Army Ranger. And so he had a lot of those qualities that I talked about earlier and all. And, but he grew into the role, and into the role of being a good captain. John, agrees with me. Early on, we butted heads a lot. He was, he wanted everything to be black and white. When the ball moves from A to B, I want to know exactly how I'm supposed to move my feet from C to D. And I would be saying to him, Bray, that's not how it works. You need to interpret. The ball moves from A to B. You need to interpret that and make a decision in terms of what's going to come on. But he grew into the role of being a leader, and so. And we didn't talk about it in those terms early on about we need you to be a greater leader. He just kind of became that person. He had that on the inside. What I would suggest to the young people here is it's little things that want to make a difference. I'm watching you. It's related to some of the questions you asked me. I'm watching you in the games. I'm watching your summer game. For the people that are about to be, finish their sophomore year in high school, this is going to be a big recruiting summer for you, or what do coaches look for? we are good at assessing body language. What do you like around your team? Are you paying attention during the huddles? Are you being supportive of your teammates on the field when they make a play? When the coach, I think when the game is over and the coach says, "Hey, we got to go on a ball hunt." Do you stand there in the middle of the field and gab with your other friends about how wonderful you are, or are you out looking for the balls? And so it's little things. All the qualities that an opportunity to demonstrate a little fearlessness. An opportunity to be a little bit selfless. The trainer's walking down carrying her equipment bag, down to the field, and you're right there with all your friends. Do you say to her, "Hey, give me that bag. I'm gonna carry that down for you"? Are you willing to do that? And at a chance, you might be slightly embarrassed to do it and stuff, but it's the right thing to do. So you may not, I think that this is something you're going to grow into. I talk about it all the time. There are people that walk in the door of my office, and from the first moment, you just feel like, ooh, this is going to be an important person in my program. Just the power, they command the room, so to speak. It doesn't mean that they're ready to be a great leader, to be a captain or a great leader on that first day. But again, I would suggest to you to look for things you can handle, and then wind up building up. You don't need, I'm a freshman in high school. You don't need to walk in the locker room and confront the senior, and scream at something, no one's expecting that, but at the same time, I'm doing it right. The upper class kids are kind of, fooling around in the weight room. I do it right. And so everybody sees you every day. You're not talking about it. You're just doing it right all the time. Everybody sees that. And so maybe it's going to be when you're a sophomore, they're going to start looking to you in terms of what's required. So look for the things that may not get that much attention. Look for the things that are not necessarily confrontational, in order to be able to, develop this skill the same as if you were trying to be a better shooter or a better passer or something else. So I hope that's helpful. Part of the, as I read these questions, and again, I'm really, really impressed with the questions that you guys sent along, but one of the things I did learn in my life was that it's very liberating for me to be able to say to you, if I needed to be able to say to you, look, I'm not sure the answer to that. I'm going to try to figure this out too. And so the questions that you've asked me are very thoughtful. And so there may not be any obvious, easy answer to some of these things. And so again, this is part of an ongoing conversation that you're going to have with the people you respect. You can reach out to me if you like, and we could talk about this some more. I could either write to you or whatever else. But the people that you respect, the coaches around you, your parents, teachers, and stuff. How do I want to play a bigger role here? How do I do it? What's the best way? What's the best way to go about that?
Tom, I know some of the folks on the call here are younger, but as you said, some are going to be going through recruiting soon. Are there things that sort of a list of things that maybe are no-nos that when you're on the sideline, you're watching a summer game, and you were like, oh my God, look at that.
Well, some of them are very obvious, and we've touched on a couple of them. You're not going to be yapping at your teammates. You're not going to be yapping at the officials in a summer league game. In high school, you're not going to stand there. Play happens. Somebody doesn't throw you the ball at the right moment. We talk about palms up. There's no palms up allowed on our practice field. And so you're just not allowed to stand there with your palms up, like, because that's a subtle criticism of your teammates and stuff. And so those kind of very, very kind of obvious things. And then the little less obvious things are things like I said. The coach pulls the team together. Are you paying attention? Are you wandering around, having a drink, gabbing with somebody else? Are you paying attention to what the coach is saying? Somebody else on your team makes a play. Are you supportive of that? You don't need to run over and, knock them down with a hug and stuff, but we can tell when you're supportive of the people the people that are around you. So we're always looking at those kind of things. You write letters to coaches, for sophomores, freshmen and sophomores and juniors. You can start writing to coaches anytime. Can the coaches write back before September 1st of your junior year? No, right? But you can assume that they're getting it. And so I'll pick somebody's name. Colin Zeller. Is that one of the Zeller boys? Anyway, Colin Zeller. I'm writing to Coach Murphy at Penn. Coach, my name is Colin Zeller. I'm a sophomore in high school. I just want to let you know I'm very interested in the University of Pennsylvania. I play at Haverford. Here's what our schedule is going to be for the spring. And so you start a chain of communication, all okay. What you want to try to avoid a little bit is, don't give me too much. I got letters from people that say to me, I'm very coachable. And to me, that's the first indication that you're not coachable, is that you think you are, and so don't be subjective, I'm going to be your hardest worker. Well, son or daughter, you have no idea what hard work is. You're a sophomore in high school, for goodness sakes, but what I am interested in is I also play soccer, or I'm the tailback on the football team, or I play basketball. So I'm a little basic information about your grades. I want to know what club are you playing on? Who's your club coach? What's your club coach's phone number? What's your club schedule going into this? You give me some of that information. So for you sophomores who would be in the middle of your sophomore season now, but going into an important summer, this is when you want to put all that information in front of the college coaches so they can make their plans. I'm going to this tournament. Oh, I know this Colin Zeller is going to be there. He's been writing to me. What a pain. He's been writing to me for a year. It's not, you don't think of what a pain, but you're thinking, I know about that young man. I'm going to go see him. He plays football at the high school, whatever other information that can be really helpful in terms of going forward. You can now you guys are so good at putting highlights on your introductory emails. I would suggest you do that. I've changed dramatically from the days when I used to tell people, do not send me a highlight tape. I don't want to see you score every goal or score on every shot or win every faceoff. But now there's so many of them that I would suggest to you, just send me a highlight tape, and I would tell you, put the good stuff in the beginning, because if the highlight tape is only 5 minutes long, I may not get to minute number 3, and so you gotta wow me in the first 60 seconds, and then later on, if we stay involved, I come and watch you play, then I'm going to say, oh, would you send me a full game tape? So I'm going to watch a whole game watch you play in high school. Because I would tell you, I want to see you lose a face-off. How do you react? Generally, if you send me a highlight tape, you win every face-off. I want to see you lose one. I want to see the ball go in. How do you react if you're a goalie and the ball just went in? Things like that, and so I want to see it completed. But that's my job to follow up with that. But in terms of what you guys should be doing, I would suggest to you, you're engaging these college coaches. Again, if you're not a junior yet, you can continue to write. You don't have to write them every day, but every couple of weeks or every month, you send a note and says, "Hey, here's what happened to me this past month. I played basketball, and our team is 9-1, and whatever it's going to be." And you'll go into a file, and the coaches will keep track of you. If they have reason to believe that you're somebody they're going to be interested in, then they're going to process all of that information. So,
Hey, Colin, did you think Coach Starsia is going to use you as an example this season?
Started. Hey. Maybe.
Hey, Carl, how you doing?
Coach, how are you?
Doing great.
You guys don't know Carl's a UVA guy too. Carl, I'll let you ask something if you want, or Colin.
Carl, you have anything to ask?
So, Colin, did I see you up at Camp Tecumseh a few years back? Were you up there?
I think that might have been the year before I went.
Oh yeah.
That you came. But I remember hearing you came.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Coach, what would you say to your team after losing in overtime in a national championship game?
Like I said, we lost twice early. In '94, I was only my second year as a head coach, and we had not had a great end of the regular season, frankly. And again, but a couple of the younger players stepped up. I can remember Dougie, actually, Doug Knight coming to my office, and Brian Birch, and saying to me, that's not going to happen again. We had just lost in the ACC tournament to North Carolina, and coming in and saying that's not going to happen again. And I didn't think we were poised to do what we wound up doing, which is to make a run to the NCAA finals, and we lost in overtime. And so it was a very positive atmosphere, even though we had lost the game. 2 years after that, when we lost again, I would tell you there were tears in the locker room, and so there's that immediate emotion after a game of not having, not having been successful. But for the most part, in my lifetime anyway, it was, very quickly could turn around to, most of my teams, I'm proud to say, would give a good effort, and so you would reflect on that, and my job at that point was to try to make them